Hey, this is Alex J from Ace 5 Studios, and we're going to be making this dynamic column today. We'll be using some various combinations of Espresso and Mograph, and we'll be using this in our facade of our Mograph city generator building tutorial that we are working on. As you can see, we'll be using lofts and various revolve objects, and we'll be cloning things and doing some Espresso to connect these various parts together. And lots of little tips and tricks peppered throughout. So let's get into it.
Need rigs? Ace5 Studios has rigs. Okay, so let's get started with the column. The first thing we're going to be modeling is the base. Now, we could make a cube that is functional, but the problem is we want it to be more dynamic. Because right now, for example, as you see, its height changes from the center. So if we move it up, and then we change its height, we have to do maths to move it back down, which is annoying. Also, if we do fillet surface, we only get one type of fillet across the whole cube. I'll show you in a moment why this is not great. So what instead we're going to do is we're going to make a rectangle. We're going to change its orientation to XZ, scale it down a bit. Then we're going to get another one, drag it up like this. And now we're going to get, in this menu here, we're going to go find a loft object and place both these guys into this. Now you might think, oh, it's the same cube, but now this rectangle, we can move it up and down to change its height very easily. So when we set up Espresso, we can, or whenever we set up anything, we can just easily change the height by moving this object. We can constrain it to things. And furthermore, we can now select both these guys and we can go rounding and we can control the rounding, how rounded this object is. If you see here, we have these little angles. That's because our loft here doesn't have enough subdivisions, so we want to increase the amount of subdivisions there. And now, so we control the roundings here on the radius, and we can control this bevel as well. If we go to loft, then we have these guys caps, and we can also increase the size of them. If you don't like this line, which I don't like, we go to untick this break from rounding. There you go, and now it's smooth together. And now we can control the height of this guy. We can control the radius of these guys too. So if we want, we can control both of them together. But yeah, that's how we make it. To control, let's also make it so that this rectangle base, rectangle top, let's make the top one actually control the radius of this one. So let's make this loft here. Let's just make a simple Espresso for now. Get this loft, Espresso. And so the basics is we drag in the rectangle top and we click on it and we go width and height. Actually, since this is probably going to be in most cases going to be a square, we could actually even control. Let's just make a user data on a loft. User data. No, let's not make it because we might want to reuse this loft later. Nah, just make it here. User data. Add user data, and let's call this width of base, and go float slider, and you know what? We'll deal with that problem later. Comes later. So not percent real 0 to 1000, not too much. Let's make it like 50 to 400. Okay, and so we're actually going to be using, you can double click on these to remove them. We're going to go rectangle top. We're going to add this guy here and height here, and then we're going to get our rectangle base. And also make sure you select the right one, because if you have top selected and you're trying to drag these in, it's not going to work. So you want to select the base and drag them in to the base little node here. There you go. And then we drag in our loft, and our loft has user data. And this will be width of base, and we will drag it into here, and into here, and into here, and into here. And we're going to increase it. That is interesting. What on earth happened here? Oh, because these guys, their rounding got shrunk. Okay. There you go. So there you go. Now I can control the base. You can control the radius of the rounding. and you can control in the loft. And you can obviously bring these together. So where is it? Shift caps, there you go. You can control the bevelness of that too. So you can obviously bring these all into one user data control depending on what you're doing, but that's just more of the same, so I'm not gonna bore you with that. So the next step is we want these little, on the column, we want these little kind of base things on this is the pedestal, and we're gonna add the base. So on the base, let's go to our side view, right view here, and let's go to our spline tools. Nope, not our spline tools. Where else? There it is. Spline pen tool. And let's switch it to B-spline. And holding the control button, I'm going to press control button, without a control button. And we can draw a little kind of shape. Boom. Press escape. Now, this obviously looks way too big, so let's scale it down. Over here, let's scale this guy like this. There you go. And if you want the top ones to be straight, you can select them all and use the scale tool to scale them down to 0. And you hold the shift key so it snaps, and you get a flat surface at the top. And we're going to move these guys a bit out here. And maybe this guy. By the way, if you see I do rectangle selection quickly, that's because on my mouse, my forward button does this. If you click and drag your forward button, if like on the side of your mouse, you should have 2 more buttons. Well, some mice have them. And you can do this, so you can do a quick drag to select things. Very convenient. Also, you can obviously, it's this one, rectangle selection here. So, I think that's about right. Do it to taste. And then we're going to create a lathe, which used to be called revolve. But there you go, lathe, whatever. And we have it. And we have our base. Beautiful. I'm going to go into our spline here and go to point mode. By the point modes up here, I just have all these mapped to 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's easy to switch between them. And we can decide how much of this we want to move. We can also add more points. We can hold the control button and just click, and that will be another point. If you bring them closer together, it'll give you a sharper edge. Further apart, it'll make it smoother. That looks good enough for me. Now, our next step here is we're going to create our main column, right? So let's make our main column. So let's label the stuff. This is our pedestal. This is our base. And let's make a end gun. End gun, where are you? End side, there you go. And make us XZ, move this guy up, scale him down, because we want him to fit in about here. Seems about right. And then copy and paste him up here, or just control drag him up. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make another loft thing. So let's select our first guy, and holding the Alt button, let's create a loft, and then drag the second guy into there. And there we go, we have our loft. Now you might want to increase the radius of these guys. And you also might want to increase the amount of them. But as you can see, let's switch our display option to garage shading lines. As you can see, they don't really line up. That's because your loft here is deciding on how many subdivisions it has, and it resamples the splines, because you can actually loft very different splines and it'll resample them to make them match up. But since we're using the same kind of end size here, we can actually, let's make an espresso here. And let's drag our top end side in here, and then drag our loft in here. And from our end side, we're going to go sides, this one. And from our loft, we're going to go subdivision U. I'm going to drag them together. And now our end-sided controls the amount of divisions that we have there. So we can decide how this is. And the great thing about this setup is, let's get our end-sided one. Let's move them a bit down here. Switch back to our display garage shading. We can actually scale this guy down so he fits in here. And we can change the size of this guy as well, so we can make him here. But what we can do even further is we can, let's call this guy base inside, and this will be top inside, and just copy and drag, just click and drag this guy, and let's call this mid inside. Now if we move this guy up, we can actually drag it and we can change the size of this column, the width of it. Because sometimes they're a bit thicker, sometimes they're skinny, depends what kind of, and you can obviously make them dance, very convenient. Now, so I think about here, let's think about the right size. Now, before we go further, let's set up a bit of controls. Because one of the things that I want to do, and the reason that I'm making this in this kind of setup instead of just polygon modeling it, is because I want to be able to control the way these things work. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let's get one of these, let's get a null, just make a null, and move them up here. And let's go make it a hexagon, make it Z, make it a bit bigger. Nope, Y. There you go, so we can see it. And what we're going to do is we're going to, this pedestal top, we're going to attach it to the location of this null. So we're going to go control, we're going to click this guy, we're going to go transform, we're going to go, not transform, we're going to go rigging tags and constraint. And we're going to take transform here, and we're going to put in this null here. Something happened. No, I just moved up a bit. So now we're going to move this null. It moves with the thing. Great, right? Now what we want to do, so let's call this bottom controller. Now we want this base to also move along with it. So as you can see right now, its axis is kind of at the bottom, which is annoying. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new null inside this bottom controller. So we're going to hold the shift button while clicking on this guy. And we're going to put this here, and we're going to make this the base. We're going to call this base. And then we want to do the same thing. We can just control drag this guy onto the base. Now it'll also move with this bottom controller. See, they move together. And we can offset it a bit, so we can go this base thing we want to, there you go, so it's a bit higher up. And the reason we can do this is because we're not constraining the base object, we're constraining a null, and then the base inside, we can replace it, we can move it without breaking our rig. So mostly you want to try and constrain things to nulls. So let's call this base con plus. No, that's not the base con, sorry, that's just the base. This guy is the con plus. Let's use correct naming convention so we don't have to control every time. So the next step is we want these guys to also, we can't put these guys in nulls because they're in a loft. So these guys have to be attached either directly to a null. And I think in this case, it'll work. We can actually, to make it easier, we can control drag this guy to copy it. Or there's also an option if you select the object you want to attach, then to the object you want to be attached to. And then if you press Shift C, you can type in there you go, add transform constraint, and it'll find it. And now it'll automatically be attached to that. So now this bottom controller, see, look at that, technologia. Okay, so we're good here. Now our next step is we want to actually control this guy a little bit as well. So let's control drag this guy out. Let's move him over here. And let's put this guy in a null. I think this loft object needs to be, or maybe not. I think it should be a null. So let's call this is our shaft. And let's call this mid con plus. And we can just use this expressor that we have here. That's probably our mid con plus. And we want to control this facing us, there you go. And we want to control our mid inside. And we want to use this guy's, let's see, we want his coordinates in the Y and the Z, because we're going to be using these two things differently. So the Y is him moving up and down. If you ever forget which colors are which, you can just look up here and you'll see Y is green, Z is blue, X is red. So we want the Y of this guy controlling the position of our mid inside. So we can just drag this in here and we can put them together. So now when we move this guy, you see that thing moves. Actually, let's make it a bit thicker so we can actually see. There you go. So as you can see, it moves up and down the column. And then we can have the Z of this guy control the thickness, the radius of this guy, of the middle guy. Boom. And now we have a little mid controller where we can control where we want the thickness very quickly. But I also want it to be a bit offset. So let's go search here. Let's go map. Oops, map add. This one. Let's drag our Z into this. And then radius into this. And let's just go here. Let's go -5. Maybe a bit more. Also, I realized we did not think about the height of this column at all when rigging this up. But it's okay, we can adjust that later. Just sometimes when you scale everything, things like this might not, like where I was subtracting something, things like this might not scale properly. But we'll fix that problem when we come to it. So we're pretty good here. All right, yeah, we're good with that. And now the next part is we want to make the top of it. So let's do that. No, we could actually we could just grab this thing, grab this base, and let's just control drag. Because see, now that it doesn't have anything attached to it, this is just geometry because the rigging was done on the null. So now we can move this guy up here. We might want to move its axis. So let's go here, turn on the axis tool and move it up. There you go. So it's more correct. But make sure you're moving it just with the green arrow, because if you just click and drag, you might have this weird stuff happening. So because the axis uses it, the location relative to the axis, and the spline is what controls how far it is. So up and down only with the green arrow. And now turn it off, and now we can rotate this guy upside down and move him here, and we can scale him down maybe. It's pretty solid. And let's just copy this guy. We're probably going to want another one and scale him up a bit. Actually, let's keep the scale the same. Let's just get our points. Where are they? Here. These points. And let's just move them out. Is that right? And let's add a cylinder in there as well. So I'm going to, where is it? Base. Let's call this, what thing the top is called. I'm just going to call it the top. And we're going to algae this and call it top. And then we're going to drag in our base in here. And then we're going to holding the shift key, because now we can see the axis in the right place. We're going to create a cylinder, which will be in the right place, and scale it down until it's the right radius. And then clicking this, we can change its height and move it, move it up vertically. And there you have it. We have a nice little top. Maybe it's too much. Let's just let's move them in a bit. There you go. We have almost a dynamic pillar. Now, so this is the end. This is the top. Where's our little top object? And we might need another top controller, right? So let's make another top controller. We're just use this null. Yeah, this null's already good enough. So let's go hexagon Y. There you go. Now, so if we click this, we can move it up and down. And now all we need to attach this top end side to the top null, I guess. So let's go Shift C again. It still remembers it. One thing to remember is don't affect the rotation. So we want to rotate this guy back to, oh, maybe it's just rotated upside down. Yeah, rotated upside down is the problem. There you go. And now when we select top, boom, movement, boom, column, dynamic columnness. And obviously, yeah, we can do this too. We can constrain these guys as well, so we can't do this if we want, but who knows, maybe at one point, maybe you'll want to, I don't know what you want to do. But yeah, so that's the beginnings of our dynamic building construction. And if you want to easily hide these guys, you can go layer and you can make a new layer, and let's call it controllers. And let's drag this guy in here, and this guy in here, and this guy in here. And then we can just go boom, not visible, boom, visible. And this way you don't have to use nulls. You can just use any kind of things for controlling things. You can use little cubes or geometry or whatever. Because you can also hide these guys by going filter and hide the nulls. Wherever they are, they are. But see, this one didn't hide because it's a spline. So yeah, I like to add them to a layer and then hide them. We can also add a bit of decoration here because we'll actually look, we need to clean up stuff. So we're not quite finished. Let's clean out little points up here. Let's move it in, move it up. There you go. It's a bit different now. And obviously you can use the cloner to add things. So if we get a cylinder here, we can shift a cloner into it, and we can change the cloner's mode to radial. And let's add some cubes to it. Make the cubes very small. Let's control our cloner's radius so that it's closer in here. Let's increase the amount of cubes. We can make them render instances just in case. And now we can move this guy up here. And we have a bit more detail. We can also close the top of it if you don't like the way it looks. Actually, can you do it? No. Yeah, so spline, point mode. Let's get this point and let's drag him, control drag him in. And there you go. You basically close the top of it. Alright, so you can tweak it to your content, but these controllers make it a bit easier to adjust where you want them while you're modeling or while you're constructing the building, which we'll be doing next. And also we'll be able to use these for rigging things as well, so it's convenient. I'll see you in the next lesson. And remember, if you need any more characters, we have a bunch of stuff on ace5studios.com. All these characters are animation ready, rigged, have materials, are fully customizable, and you can use them in your own commercial projects. We also have more stuff here, like some free rigs you can try out. We have character building kits. We have packs of simpler characters for infographics and infomercials and whatever it is you're making. There's kids. There's also some animals there, so go check it out. You won't be sorry.